Hey guys, it's me. I'm back. Live shows once again from the continental United States of America, where we pledge allegiance to this flag. No. With all due respect to our flag and to our nation, we need to talk about some politics, folks, because that's what everybody else is talking about. But hey, I have a very special take on some of those issues. And in a recent conversation that I had with my good friend Renee, who was one of the hosts of the Moral Tea podcast, we hopped on a little group and community discussion, threw out some topics, and today you guys get a chance to see that interview, as well as come in and ask some important questions. What the heck were you talking about, Erskin, when you were talking about politics? I agreed with this, I disagreed with this. Maybe more clarification about that. And so I'm going to be alongside of you guys, riding the ship, watching this show, or rewatching this show, and you guys get a chance to be a part of the experience here today. And so thank you guys so much for tuning in the Erskin Music Show. If I'm in my palatial estate, as you can clearly see that I am here today, it means that I am not in my home studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Dateline October 15th, and we are live from Tupelo, Mississippi. So anyway, love to have you guys comment on the show today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for those of you who are watching. It's the Erskin Music Show, and we're talking about politics today. All right, Big Head is invited to the studio today because Big Head has been a part of the show for many occasions, and so hello today, sir. I'm glad that you could make it today. And I'm glad that you came back from your overseas trip. It's very, very consistent of you to do that sort of thing. And yes, we have a family of big heads who are here. One of them likes to party all the time. Party all the time, party all the time, party all the time. Yes, indeed. And so let me get tags out of the way. You guys know that I use source material from time to time. And for those of you who want to watch the full interview of what it is that I'm going to be airing today, make sure that you guys tune in and click the link so that you can see the full interview for today. But let's get this out of the way. Let's get this out of the way because we've got more material than we can actually get to today. So news, comment, reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Don't give me any copyright strikes. You guys know that I don't need any of those in my life. And for those of you who are watching on various platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, Rumble, and all of the different associated things, then I appreciate you. We need to get some more people to subscribe to the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, then go ahead and subscribe to the show, share the show. Do whatever you can to let people know about this show and what it is that we're talking about on this show. It's politics today. It could be the clown show of things that are going on in our culture. With the LGBT movement. It could be the deletion of life, also known as abortion. We could be talking about a variety of different things there, and so I want you guys to see my face and know that I'm live here. Any comments that you guys have to make, especially in reference to politics today, I would love it. Hey, and if you guys want to just jump on and just say hello because you guys haven't seen me in a while, that's fine as well. But I want to make sure that you guys always have good content that's coming, and so let people know about this. Gospel choir some good. Hallelujah! And there should be many occasions for them to say that today. All right, in lieu of our customary devotion that we do during this time, I've got an hour and a half broadcast that I'm going to try to distill down to, the length and duration of this show is about an hour. And so let me make sure that I get a good start for our show today. I'm going to be popping in, making some comments. It is the Erskin Music Show, and so you guys get treated to the best of the best. There are some cut-ins and some different things that I wanted to add for today, and so we're going to enjoy ourselves today. Enjoy being back in the show. And I'll be back in the studios tomorrow, but we're going to enjoy ourselves today and enjoy the show today. And so without further ado, let's get to our top story, which would be politics, kingdom, against our culture, against what we're thinking about in politics today. It is our top story today, and a long interview that I'm going to chop up with several segments, and you guys comment as well. So. All right, as I had said before, this is the interview that I had. You can see it's an hour and a half long. We're obviously not going to be able to watch an hour and a half of this, but I do think that there's a beginning segment there where, before they get into who the introductions are and the various folks that are there, and spend way too much time introducing me. We just kind of eased our way into that portion of it. If you're watching the Erskin Music Show, you probably already know that I'm a music artist based in Nashville, Tennessee, and pretty much taking over the world. Not by my might, not by my power, but it's kind of like David going against Goliath. The world is a big place, and you would think, how can you overcome and take that over? And yet, the Lord just keeps saying, hey, you got a sling, you got a stone, and you got a heart for the Lord, let's go get it. No excuses. And so I'm not making any excuses today for some of my takes on politics. You guys know that as an independent voter, I am a voter, and I am independent, but I care way more about the kingdom than I do the Democrats and the Republicans. However, that since they dominate the news media cycle and they're the ones who are the talking mouths that are out there, I'm gonna have to deal with them for just a second, so that we can get to some of these independent values that I actually think every Christian needs to find themselves in the midst of this conversation kind of an independent. Because if you're heavy Democrat and you're a Christian, first of all, I would want you to go back and check and see where you line up biblically with the definition of a Christian. I would ask you if you're a Democrat that kind of question. But I would also have some concerns if you're a heavy Republican, if you're not substituting your priority for the kingdom of man for the kingdom of God. So that's the kind of things that we get into in this discussion. I would love it if you guys would jump on and say hello. We can have some lighthearted moments throughout the day. But let's go ahead and get this started for today. This is Pro Nation versus Pro Kingdom.
Do you think that sometimes we conflate the theocratic rule of the nation of Israel to the United States of America in an unhealthy way, or should we clarify that more, maybe for the sake of this podcast, or do we make a one-to-one correspondence and say, just like the nation of Israel was given these laws and these principles, which in a theocracy, compassion was baked into the laws of the theocratic rule, but God was the one who was ultimately ruling over them. So are we the same thing, or is there a difference that we need to assign?
I am so excited today for Moral Tea. I'm Renee Leonard Kennedy. Anna Grace Smith is taking the day off. And I have my wonderful cohorts, whom you remember from one of the last podcasts where we were talking politics. I have Sarah and Walter. It's Sarah Walters and Walter Murillo. And then we have our new guest that I cannot wait to hear from, my friend Erskin. And Erskin, you'll have to say your last name and just tell us a little bit about yourself. Erskin wears many, many hats, does many, many things, and he does everything with excellence. And he glorifies the Lord in all of them. So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Erskin.
All right. So if you're watching the Erskin Music Show, you already know that. All right, so let me skip ahead here to the 17-minute mark, and we'll just chop this up a little bit. 17-minute, and we'll take sort of a long dive into this discussion so that I think you guys can see the tenor of the discussion and kind of the back and forth with the rest of the panel and the guests that are there. And so let me just speed it up here. Let me take it to a place where I think you guys are going to get a lot of extra value at the 17-minute mark, as we just introduced some of these topics and started to broach the idea of kingdom and culture and politics.
Is kingdom values, and I'll say that very loosely with air quotes, people can see that. And then another one that embraces at least saying the name of Jesus, at least saying something in relationship to pro-life principles, but not always so much in relationship to the disenfranchised. And so that does add a measure of tension to the discussion. And so I'm interested to see where this goes today.
Okay, give me, if you will, and I love this. Give me your definition so that we are all on the same page. I believe that we've got to define things before we can talk about them. Who are the disenfranchised? And I'm not asking that stupidly. I want to make sure that I understand what you're talking about, who they are and what are their needs.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I see what you did there.
What?
Because no, this is great. I love the question. Let's
Yeah.
please define that,
Yeah.
because there have been people who have uh, probably even recently, because I have this moniker on my bio that says something to the effect of diversity spokesman.
Yeah.
And they're like, so what does he mean by that? Does he mean he's going to just jump into the foray with this diversity, equity, and inclusion model here? And, we're going to have to listen to him talk about all those types of things. And I'm like, well, I guess I probably should define that a little bit more, because if that's what people think they're going to get, they're going to be sorely mistaken when they start listening to me talk about some of those issues. And so, James would say pure and undefiled religion before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being spotted by the world, James 1:27. Beyond that, I think that broadly, when Jesus says, let your light so shine, Matthew 5:16, before men that they may see your good works and glorify the Father in heaven, there's this general sense in which everybody sees that poor people, economically poor people who don't have means maybe to feed themselves, clothe themselves, educate themselves, adequate health care, food, water, those types of things, helping them to better the quality of their lives in the same vantage point that we would say that in the American dream, it's the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. To help somebody who's not able to do those things move along that continuum in some type of compassionate way. And I would say probably even a non-coerced way, generally compassionately caring for people like that, would embody that belief that I'm talking about, to be clear, about who the disenfranchised are. I'm not talking about perpetual victimhood. I'm not talking about discrimination. I'm not talking about racism. That's a totally different discussion as far as this relates. But it is that ground level care and concern and compassion for those that are disadvantaged.
Well, I think, and you all chime in, I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that, because I think it's absolutely where my heart is. What I take issue with on the Democrat side, and I understand what you're saying about the Republican side, is how we do it. I don't think it should be a government issued thing. Anytime the government goes in to the care and concern for the disenfranchised, as you identified them, I feel like they do it poorly. And, I even look at the VA, the way the VA has epically failed our veterans, and how they were trying to do that. It just, to me, anything that has the stamp of government on it is done with such excess eventually. And I do think both sides, I'm not talking, this is one party. The money gets lost in the Capitol and goes home in their pockets rather than to the people that it's intended to. And that's very third world country or battle torn country. So that is my problem with both sides.
Okay. Since I'm broadcasting from a hotel, it looks like whenever I do the broadcast and the YouTube channel, it'll stream that through clearly. And if I don't have the YouTube channel going, it'll stream me through clearly. And so you got to pick your poison. But I did want to jump in and say something here that is an observation that I'm beginning to make since being back in the States. Obviously, while we were gone, Hurricane Helene came through the Carolinas, East Tennessee, and Western North Carolina, and really just devastated people's lives and communities that were there. And so it, again, initiated this round of discussion with regards to FEMA and some of the unhelpful ways that FEMA is structured, government agencies that typically take a lot of bureaucracy and red tape, and the action points of compassion kind of get lost in the immediacy of needs that are there. And so I think it does, what Renee's point is, and she's making there, I think is a good one in terms of how much should the government be involved in those things. Obviously, there's going to be a broad spectrum of people. When I talk to our neighbors, they think the government should be involved in everything. The government should be involved with complete universal health care for everybody. They think the government should be involved in some of the family decisions and life decisions that are involved. Government should be involved in education. Government should be involved in those kind of things. And so I think part of our discussion today should center on how we view the role of government alongside of this issue of care and compassion, because obviously the Bible has a certain mandate that's involved there for Christians, believers, and then I would say by extension a group of believers, i.e. the church, how it is that we should respond to the world and the needs that are around us. But knowing that there are gaps that are there, what is the government's role, I guess, is a good question to just throw out to you guys today as you listen to the rest of this discussion, or this portion of the discussion. What is the role of government in doing these things? And are we asking a political party, politician, or a group of lawmakers to enact laws that obligate people to respond a certain way or obligate certain financial allocations for those who are poor? Now, I've had this discussion numerous times with my friends who have said, how do we quantify in a nation that is so blessed and financially able as ours, who even poor people are? Because there's a certain amount of, and I must acknowledge this, and I'm wondering what you guys think about this. Jump on and tell me what you think about this. We must acknowledge that there's a certain amount of poor people who are poor because of choices that they are making, putting the onus and burden of responsibility on them, saying, we could work a job, but we don't really want to work a job. We could work harder. Maybe in some kind of ethical framework, we should work harder, but we're not going to work harder. It's easier to hold this sign up and beg for food than it is to actually go out and work for food. And I don't know, I've never been on the beg for food side of things, but in a world that has fallen, there's the tension point of knowing that it is very difficult to go out and work for that food. Yeah, there's going to be thorns and thistles. Whatever career or vocation or occupation that you are involved in, there is going to be difficulty and toil and struggle and labor. There are some people who are like, you know what, our society is pretty good. I can live in a comfortable environment and live mostly homeless, off the grid, all the different things that afford me an opportunity to do what it is that I pretty much want to do. And that's a decision that some people make. And so I think alongside of this discussion that we're having, and I know I'm talking a long time, but I'm going to be talking a long time on this, is a conversation about how do we categorically put people, or at least assign responsibility to people. When we bring in the idea of politics, what are we asking these politicians to do? Because depending on your answer to that, it really does kind of determine what you see are the strengths, benefits, pros, cons, and weaknesses, if you will, of any type of political structure that we adhere to. So with that in mind, with that discussion ongoing, let's stop me and let's continue this discussion.
It's like, like if we make this a mandate or some sort of program, it's being misused, it's being misappropriated. What are your takes, Sarah and Walter, on what Erskin said?
I'll go first.
Mhm.
Just to tap on, there's a couple things. There's first the definition of who's the poor and which people we're supposed to tend to, because we have the immigrants that just crossed over, and that's where the focus is right now to take care of. And then we have our own poor, the homeless, which are kind of getting ignored right now because the focus is on the immigrants and what they're doing. And then the other thing would be is it the government's responsibility to take care of the poor? Oh, that God created, like you right? We're dividing between if it's kingdom or nation, right? Building, and God created the church to take care of the poor. God created the church to kind of just lead that spear to make sure that the poor are taken care of. And the thing is that the church hasn't lived up to that. So now we are making the government God and having them kind of control us more and more and have more responsibilities, and that's why more and more they want more and more control. So that's kind of the aspect where I'm just like, where's the definition and how do we get around that and see what is our own individual responsibility as the church and what is the responsibility of the government to do, right? Because we have supposedly the government was created so they won't have a big rule over us. They would just take care of the necessary, like the military and the rule of law, right? But other than that, like healthcare, taking care of the poor, it's truly the church's responsibility, and that's how the Lord set it up when He established basically Israel. So that's kind of a concept that I'm kind of still in limbo and just like wondering where do we go on from this. So Sarah, if you want to chime in.
No, I think it's very interesting how you put that, Walter, especially relating back to the original concept of our nation. We're a nation under God, indivisible, right? The pledge that nobody really learns anymore. I found a lot of people that don't even know our national anthems. Crazy to me. But no, if we're a nation founded under God, then our nation as a whole, our government, our people, our citizens are tasked with building the kingdom, are tasked with doing what Jesus would do, right? If our nation chooses to stray from that, then they have no place in doing what Jesus would do, which is care for the poor. So I think it really relates back to the heart of our government. If we desire to be, you know, a nation under God and we desire to build our nation for his kingdom, then we should do these things from our government, from our people's pockets, from our church. But if we don't, then that's the whole issue, because a lot of the things we're talking about go down to morality, and morality is based in truth, which is the word of God, right? If our nation doesn't follow those truths, then how can they even make a judgment on who's the disenfranchised, who's the one we're supposed to support? How are we supposed to allocate these funds? Because we have no moral framework for this allocation.
Let's get some guy named Erskin back in here to join the discussion. I'm trying to prompt you guys into actually engaging this topic, because it's one that is not new, and it's one that is not going away. And depending on, and I should say, regardless of the results of the election that is coming up, the conversation is not going away. It'll only be another version of it. But I think we've broached a topic that I hope you guys are hearing this clearly enough, and I hope that there's not enough not too many lags or distractions here for you to engage in where it is that we're at with this discussion. But it is simply this: how do we, since we're started talking about morality, how do we assign moral clarity and moral primus to our leaders who are perhaps not even Christian? Is there a moral standard that they should be held to for those who are not believers? You have to be very careful with the way that you answer that question, because you could push that to the extreme and it belies the hope of the gospel, which is a transformation inwardly that manifests itself both inwardly and outwardly, but outwardly as a result of the dynamic regenerative change that's taking place within our hearts. And so to put a moral framework, so this is the tension point, right? Because Al Mohler, I think, does a good job of, in some of his briefings and discussions, of saying any type of republicanism or conservatism that is devoid of the moral impetus behind it is really it really struggles to capture what the hope and the embodiment of truth is. You're telling a lie. You're framing it in such a way that it has truthful presuppositions that are related to it, but it's framed and couched within the context of a lie because it has no moral association that's ultimately attached to Jesus. And so it's morality for what sake? Morality for what sake? If you're not a believer where your allegiance is to Jesus and the gospel and the kingdom of God, then you have to assign other reasons. And this is a conversation that I'm eager to have with people. Any type of moral framework, and I would say that by and large we have to have a moral framework. The reason why I say that is because one of the things that we were so vociferously arguing about after the last election, as many people will consider, one, having said that, and then two, having continued with this type of mentality, the last election was stolen from the Republicans by virtue of fraud, right? Wasn't that a major discussion that was going on? And I say discussion, it was obviously more than a discussion. There was some coercion and calls and, all the different things, and then January 6th, all the things. So baked within the framework of our Constitution, there has to be this thing where we're telling the truth. When we enfranchise voting, we're saying that people have the opportunity to vote and that vote counts. We do have an electoral college process, but that their vote counts and is measured against a certain means. All right, if that's the case, stealing votes, not counting votes, manufacturing votes that don't actually exist or invalid, or whatever voter fraud discussion you want to have, and whatever degree you want to have that discussion, says essentially our moral framework is that an election should be fair. Where does fairness come from? That is a biblical value through and through. But listen, this is the point that I'm laboring to make here this morning. If our biblical framework is not associated with Christ, Jesus himself, the incarnate Son of God, then we have to default to some lower tier in reference to that expectation of moral clarity. I'm moral because if I look a certain way or I talk a certain way, I get more votes. I'm moral because morality in this particular group of people will galvanize this voting bloc. I'm moral because if I can paint myself as a little bit more moral than the other person that's out there, then I can win the votes. It becomes at its base level, and you guys know this in politics, in an ugly, just slap your mama ugly form. It becomes manipulation at its highest order. And it can even become manipulation using the nomenclature and backdrop of Jesus himself. And that's when it gets to be ugly. That's where I think that there are some concerns that I have about the Republican Party. Now, I have some concerns about the Democratic Party. But let's let this conversation continue to go here. You got to lose me so that you can have them in the discussion. And so maybe at this point you want to. Get them back up here.
That's the issue with handing all of this over to the government. That's the issue with handing anything over to the government that's not held to the principles and truths that we know are self-evident.
So you're saying basically the powers that be, whoever they are, whoever's voted in, is I hate to say the word dictate, but they dictate what the poor and the needy are or who they are.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because our government, while they don't rule over the people, while they're not supposed to rule over the people, they do make rules for the people.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever is in office, whoever is in your state office, those are the people who are leading you. So if they're not building you towards the kingdom, then you've gotten off on the wrong foot from jump. Like that. That's my issue, is that we have to be careful when we put people in office. We have to be careful who we're following. In the same chapter you were quoting, Matthew 6, it says, I think verse 24, no one can serve two masters.
Mm-hmm.
So if we serve our legislators, right, and they're our master, or if we serve our political party, then we're not all unified as a nation or as a kingdom. But if we're all serving one master, which should be God, because he clearly knows what he was doing, he kind of created all of this, then we'll be unified, and we won't have to worry about who's legislating when we care for the poor or who the poor actually are, because we will be unified under one leader that will show us that. And I know it sounds very religious, but honestly, it's the truth of the matter.
Ooh, I gotta jump back in. I want you to jump in today. And I know you're processing all of this. And listen to what young Sarah is saying there. Brilliant young lady who has given us some insights in terms of, I don't even know that we can define, if we don't have proper leadership, who should be getting help and who the disenfranchised and who the poor are among us. A really big statement. I don't even know if Sarah realized how big this statement was, but she's a genius, and so she probably did. She probably just implanted this in the show, just because she knew this is going to blow up the moral tea, and it's going to blow up the Erskin Music Show, and it's going to blow up every political discussion. What do we do when we have non-believers who are running the government? Because it's not, America is not a pure democracy. You do recognize that. Surely you recognize that. At this point, you recognize that we are not on Capitol Hill voting for every bill, putting forward every piece of legislation, reviewing every piece of legislation that comes through. We elect people who are representatives who will then go to Capitol Hill, who will then go and represent us before the larger government entities, the Senate and House of Representatives and all various entities connected to those. And so we can often, in some cases, be persuaded to or misled to believe that there's a certain moral character or a certain necessity that we have to have people who are representing us. We don't have time in our work lives, in our family lives, in our spiritual lives to go to Washington and vote on every single bill, or to have it sent to us and then read through everything. That would stifle productivity, and it would not be the overwhelming ability of us to pursue the things that God has put before us, and the flourishing of our nation and the building of various things that we have in terms of our economy. And so we're having people who are representing us when the people who are representing us, one, i.e. don't represent us, or the people, from my vantage point, are representing me who are not believers. Can they still do a good job of representing me? And that is the bomb that Sarah has just put into this show. Because there'd be a lot of folks who would say yes, they can absolutely, just like a doctor who's not a believer, can perform their task extremely well and get extremely good results because of the skill that they have. It is not necessary that they become a believer. And sometimes, in the midst of this discussion, we would prefer a doctor who is skilled at what it is they're doing, whether they be believer or not, over someone who's just a believer who may, they're okay, but they're not great at what it is they're doing. Which would you rather have doing open heart surgery on you? And so again, Sarah has put a bomb into this discussion that I think is one in which there are a lot of conservative believers, and I respect my conservative friends who are saying things like this to me. We have to get out and vote, and we have to get out and vote for Donald Trump, because if we don't go and vote for Donald Trump, then we're essentially throwing away the power that we could levy to get him elected into office, because we need him elected, because the alternative to him being elected is a Kamala Harris administration and all the different things, Harris-Walz administration, and all the unpacking of this pro-death agenda that they have as part of their platform. And so you have to make this decision, because we need to put people in office that more clearly associate with our moral framework, even though they themselves don't carry that Christocentric, gospel-laden mentality. They don't have to. And so that's the point in which I want you guys to dive into the discussion and say, does wisdom necessitate, does prudence and the expediency and interpretation of our times necessitate that we must vote, if you're a Christian, for the Republican Party, because in the two-tiered, two-party system that we have, if we don't vote for the Republican Party, it may mean that the Democratic Party may win. I come back and say, well, let's just do the math. Not literally, because I think that based on what it is that I'm saying, the Republicans should probably win this election pretty easily. If, it's pretty much neck and neck, but there's about a 4% margin there, and I think that 4% margin, 4 to 6% margin kind of swings in those swing states conservatively. But could be wrong about that. I'm not prognosticating or calling the election, but it seems like the tie, if the Democrats were up by 10, 11, 15 points, I would think it's a tie. I think it's that lopsided at this point, and that the Republicans pretty much sweep this election fairly easily at this point, unless there's some type of October surprise. That's just my prognostication. But I will say this also, I am curious to do the work of thinking, what if the Democrats win this election and they start moving our country even more in a direction that is antithetical to the biblical values that I hold? Does that mean that we have lost the cultural war? And does that mean the primacy of the gospel can now no longer take effect? What I'm arguing is that sometimes in those areas that lead or backdrop or context in the darkest moments, they actually become the backdrop for seeing the brightest light in the form of Christ. And so I don't hang the results of the election and the kingdom on the election results. If the Democrats win, and so far as we understand elections to be held for the most part fairly in our society, I will submit to a Kamala Harris leadership, Tim Walz leadership in our society. I'm not going to be a revolutionary in that regard. Unless and until, for my pacifist friends out there, they begin to infringe in some fundamental right. What is that? Oh, and we can talk about what that is a little bit later when we talk about revolution and just war theory. But so far as I understand, the kingdom of God is not an issue in reference to the fact that the kingdom may go away if one party gets elected over the other. So that's where I come from. That's typically why I have no problem voting independent for the person who I think would do the best job in that position, and for parties that will put forward candidates that I think appropriately could do that job well and glorify God with a moral framework. So I said a lot, but Sarah just dropped a bomb in the show, and I wanted to make sure that you guys acknowledge, or at least got a chance to hear her acknowledge where the sticking point is for this conversation.
Yeah. So if I might just jump in for just a moment and just say that I think it's Albert Mohler who does a fantastic job on the podcast. If you get a chance to listen to his briefing, he's the president of Southern Seminary.
Yes.
And he talks about the misapplied principle that you can't legislate morality by simply turning that around and saying you always legislate morality. Whatever laws are passed becomes the moral framework by which people can evaluate what is good and evil, what is compassionate, what is not compassionate, what is waste, what is graft, what is, spending. And so whatever laws are passed, to your point, Sarah, are a reflection of the moral character of the people who are passing those laws and enforcing those laws, and some idea of the worldview framework for even the rationale to pass those laws. I wanted to go back to something here, and maybe I don't want to hijack your discussion here, Renee.
No, I want you to do this. Please do, Erskin. Let's just,
okay.
It's a collaboration. Let's all do it.
But I wanted to just clarify for those who are watching, when we talk about America as a Christian nation or Christian principles, Christian values, do you think that sometimes we conflate the theocratic rule of the nation of Israel to the United States of America in an unhealthy way, or should we clarify that more, maybe for the sake of this podcast, or do we make a one-to-one correspondence and say, just like the nation of Israel was given these laws and these principles, which in a theocracy, compassion was baked into the laws of the theocratic rule, but God was the one who was ultimately ruling over them. So are we the same thing, or is there a difference that we need to assign for this discussion?
I think that's a great question. I personally do not think we're a theocratic, we're a republic. However, Walter, do you have any thoughts on this? Because I could use your wisdom about now.
Well, that's pretty profound what you just said. It kind of divides and it kind of begins to dissect a little bit deeper of what we're trying to go into. And it's true, right? Like God created the nation of Israel with his laws, and God eventually just started developing them, and they had to read the Bible. And every time they didn't, they would morally decline, and their nation would decline. But as well, it's principles that we have kind of just embraced as a nation and kind of installed, right? Because murder, it's a moral sin, and it's also a law that you cannot commit because of the Bible, right? You shouldn't steal. It's because of the Bible, right? And then in some places, adultery is not even tolerated.
Mhm.
So in all these aspects, we see like the Ten Commandments as the guideline for our nation to kind of grow in. So were our forefathers focus on Christian principles to walk in Christian principles, or was our nation was we'll take some of it and then the rest we'll just do it as we want? That's the whole concept behind it, is like, how do we define that and how do we separate it? Because when we see the main reason our nation was kind of divided and we wanted to separate ourselves was because of the taxation, right? We didn't
Mhm.
want to be taxed, but now we're being taxed a lot for everything. We get taxed for our income, and then after we have our income, we get taxed for our mortgage, we get taxed for our sales, we get taxed basically
When
for
we die,
yeah, exactly. So
Oh, it's expensive to die.
it is expensive.
it is expensive, but that's what we kind of deviated from what we started our nation from. We didn't want to be taxed. We didn't want to be ruled over. We didn't want to be constantly given our finances for the government to say what they want to do with our money. But it just becomes so money hungry, and then with man, it becomes so corrupt. So in principle, I believe our nation was installed to be a nation under God, right? A nation with Christian principles. But I think we deviated from it, and now we're so far gone from it that we have like a little resemblance of it, but we're far from it. We're far
I
from.
mean,
All right. Hotel guys jumping back in here for a discussion point. My question to you guys is this. Are we at a place now where, to quell some of the disagreements on both sides, we should be pushing this more in terms of a Christian nation? We should be pushing this away from a Christian nation and those types of values. Those two connective points don't match up, and they don't play very well together. And the dividing line between the two of those things is you're bumping up against what our interpretation of the Constitution is. Are we in a position where, or are we in a strong position, I should say, to say that our founding fathers could see this day and put within the framework of the Constitution the ability for us to move helpfully and healthily through these types of troubled waters and emerge victorious on the other side? They saw this coming. They knew it would happen. It would be a struggle, but if we go back to the foundation and we just do what these principles allow us to do, we'll move through quite easily into the next era of existence. Or should we be asking a question about reframing the framework? And I know that as soon as I say that, people are going to say, that's a very Democrat thing to say. But let's honestly look at the question, should we be reframing the Constitution to adjust for the nuances of what we're discussing here in terms of identifying the poor, who needs care and concern there, and also identifying some of these other things in relationship to our conversation here today. And so I'm going to let it run here for just a second. You can't have me and you can't have this, and so let's get this and let's drop me for a second.
yeah, you're right. To your point, I just wanted to say in the Bible, the exact verse I was quoting, it says you cannot serve God and wealth. So what you were talking about with the taxation is actually strictly against a biblical principle. God often talks about the love of money being the root of all evil, I believe is the quote. Y'all help me out. I don't memorize scripture to quote it, but that's the thing, is our nation has exactly what Walter says, taken what they wanted from these Christian ideologies and then ignored the rest. And there's a phrase that our beloved editor Dylan Dry always says that I have such a problem with sometimes, but it's almost like our nation's trying to play God. We're trying to choose what works best. We're trying to take what we want and then leave the rest, and you can't do that.
Right.
Erskin? I think that's a good point. I had Tom Buck on my show, who's one of the leaders in the Southern Baptist Convention came to the Erskin Music Show the other day, and we were talking about politics because I'd noticed that some of his Instagram posts and social media was kind of geared toward helping Christians understand how to vote. And so we had a really good discussion, kind of piggybacking on some things that Albert Mueller had said, is that, you have a type of conservatism in our country that is devoid of some of the moral propellant behind it, and theological propellant behind it, and that ultimately is a failing proposition. You can't have conservatism without having Christian principle and Christianity. And to your point, Sarah, and also Walter, I think that when you try to organize the laws of a land based on Christian principles that you no longer believe, or Christian principles that you cannot assign to a particular deity, then you begin to struggle. And with the e pluribus unum, like, we have a conglomerate of ideas, we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of religion, free exercise, of those types of things. It begins to get difficult when you're trying to approach that question. Like, even when I worked for a period of time in the educational system in the public schools in Texas. I retired from the Texas Teachers Association. But even there was supposed to be this idea of educating people without reference to God and religion, because they didn't want that to cloud the things that were going on there. Because if someone says, hey, I'm a Muslim and this is what it is that I want to practice, I'm Buddhist, this is what I want to practice, and so that should dominate the educational process there. No, we want to devoid ourselves of that so that we can get down to basic education. Now you see how, and this was years ago, but now you can see how much we've faltered in the area of education, because we can't arrive at a center point that is helpful for everybody across the board. And so we're trying to borrow these principles of Christianity and trying to have, well, we want students to be honorable. We want students to not cheat. But where do those principles come from? You can't have the principle without having the one who actually gave those things, and then have some idea in mind that you should worship him. And so I don't want to, run a far afield here, but all the discussions that people have about the 10 Commandments, it's not just the memorial of putting the 10 Commandments in a public place. It is a moral fabric and foundation that is directly attached to a God who says there are no other gods.
Right.
And so
yes.
Once we start to say those are good moral principles, there's a good rules to live by, everybody would probably say, yeah, we probably shouldn't kill people. Like, we probably should, honor the authorities that are there. That's fine. But if you can't get back to the fact that God said, I'm the only God and there is no other God except for me, I'm the only one to be worshiped, then you just have conservatism without any type of power behind it. You have a form of godliness and you deny the power thereof.
Yes.
Well, I love that, but how do we get to where we need to be? Because that is the big question is, we're all talking about it, we're all thinking about it, we're all praying for it. It's weird, like, even to pray, I'm like, God, show me how to pray for our government and our electors, and and the candidates. And so how do we get here to a place? Because as Anna Gray and I often say, when we get into a morality problem, you can't, the cat's out of the bag. And it is true. We have said, we have put morality in, you stamp it, and then you look at a demographic such as, Michigan, and there's a huge Muslim contingent there, and they don't worship the one true God. They have Allah. And then even Vivek, he gave a very reasoned response but you have to go look. We'll try to tag that into our show notes, about how he admitted to being a Hindu, or not admitted, he just said, I'm a Hindu. We follow the Judeo-Christian values, and there's similarities, in all, and some of the faiths. So how do we get here as a nation that is divided in so many different ways, by ethnic group, by religious background, by views, by who needs to do what and who needs to pay for it? How do we do this? Because it is so overwhelming as a mere citizen who is showing up to vote. So let's do some thought there, because I have no idea.
Well,
Except for,
can
I
I-
know, yeah, go
Can I
ahead.
first of all just commend you for the statement that you made, because I think that it brings a measure of at least calm to this. It brings a measure of our ultimate responsibilities to this larger discussion. We might disagree after this statement, but I think that putting this squarely in the pages of scripture in terms of first, I urge you then, first of all, that petitions and prayers and intercession and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. And I think that that prayer component should be there. I was really discouraged when we transitioned from the Trump administration to the Biden administration, and I heard Christians change the tone. Some Christians, I know this is not by and large, but some Christians that I was around changed their tone from being one in which we need to pray for President Trump, we need to pray for his salvation, we need to pray for his well-being, we need to pray that he has, good government that gets established, to the Biden administration being, we need to pray against him, we need to pray that, imprecatory things against his administration, that he would fail. And I'm thinking, I don't think that should be the tone that
No,
we
it shouldn't.
approach any president or any leader with, that you want them to fail and that you are, not concerned about ultimately their salvation. That should be the same area of concern. And so I think that I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we might go different places after this, but I think that if we don't start there, maybe even some of that conversation is irrelevant.
Well, I do want to bring up, in our last podcast, there's two things. I watched the first debate between former President Trump and President Biden. And I don't like debates. They make me nervous. I want to live in the Shire and everybody hold hands and everybody get along.
And I love them.
I just want to love them, and I just want to have a picnic, and we have a dinner together, and we listen to music, and we worship God. That is what I want. Okay. So about 2 minutes in, when President Biden stumbled, I was shocked by my reaction. I wasn't joyful. I wasn't, oh yay, this is, a big thing. I was heartbroken for him. I was heartbroken over because I have a family member who is going through similar mental distress like this, and this is severe mental problems. And it just broke my heart. It broke my heart. And I was like, oh God, help him. And so that was shocking to me. I was also shocked when I was walking across the dam of my pond. I wasn't cussing Erskin. I was walking across the dam.
You live in the Shire, from what I understand.
I did. Well, you'll be on the Shire soon, you and your beautiful family. So I was walking across there, and Shonda, my friend, texted me or called me, and she said, hey, Trump's been shot. And I said, what? So I was like, okay, what? She's asking me for a news flash when I try to ignore news anymore because I need peace, and just watch someone said, you always hear what you need to hear, because from your friends, they'll talk it. But so she had called me. My first thought was, I'll go and check all the regular alphabet numbers. And I went, no, I'm going to go to the town square. And I went to Twitter, which is always an interesting heartbeat of various people. And so I saw the film. But then what was wild about it, there were those, pray for it. And, it didn't matter, those were those who said, I don't care what side of the aisle I'm on, I'm praying for him. I'm like, yay, that's the way it should be. But then there are other people, oh, they missed. How could you miss? So with that in mind, how do we do this as a people when there's just a meanness to us all?
Yeah.
And I think it can come up in all of us. I do think there's a generous spirit that we need to seek first the kingdom of God, because, and I think this is where the pro-kingdom comes in, because we are not able to utter or to pray for our leaders in the right way, or, to do anything without seeking him. So can you all talk about that?
All right, let's see if we can get me back in here. All right, I wanted you guys to hear those last words from Renee asking a question. And if you would want to see the length and the entirety of this interview, it spans for another, I would say, 40 or so minutes before it winds down. Really good discussion. I wanted to air that today because I think the discussion points that are out there are things that we'll continue discussing. They're things that are important to people, and so we'll obviously go perhaps different ways regarding those, but it does give some rationale as to how to frame the discussion, how to frame some of the conversation that's out there. How do we understand compassion? How do we understand our responsibility with regards to both Harris and Waltz, which would be the side that I most vehemently argue against the principles of their foundation and platform. But then there's principles and there's people. How do we discern the right place to contend for kingdom values and the way to contend for kingdom values while at the same time preserving relationships and those things that are out there. And so I wanted you guys to see a portion of that interview today. Vote. All right, so that's coming up there. Let me stop sharing that. I want to give you guys a little, as we get ready to go here today, we got a couple more minutes left in the show, about 5 or so minutes left in the show today. I want to give you guys something. It is a music show. This is not my music, and so hasten to say, some bot out there is waiting for me to play a portion of this. But this is for educational purposes. Since we've been talking about voting today, we've been talking about the Democrats, Republicans, we've been talking about the system that we have, we're talking about the Constitution, Supreme Court judges, all manner of discussion that we've been having today. I felt like this would be an appropriate end to that discussion, and it comes from Bizzle and God Over Politics. Take a listen.
Everybody act like everything's black, white, Democrat, Republican, good side, bad side. Which one's which though? Both tell mad lies to get votes, and both to manipulate mankind with info. Land of the animals, you don't understand no. Donkeys and elephants, I'm riding with the land no. Lion and goat, but all this was planned for. So I keep the word over bull like Lambo. I am nobody's mascot of Sambo, and I don't care about a flag or what it stand for. I care more about the cross and who carry it, cause if you love Christ, I don't care if you American. That's what unites us. It's about the who, not the red, white, and blue. It is Christ that ignites us. Rich man, poor man, free man, lifer. One race covered by the same blood, Christ up. I never came for the smoke, but to watch it is not an option. Let's get it poppin'. Let's do it. I lift his name till I go, and if y'all think you finna stop it, let's get it poppin'. Let's get it.
All right. That's nice. That's nice. I like that. I like it when people put them bars up in there. So our discussion today has been politics today, and hopefully that will range into the educational part of that and just say he says a lot with a little bit of space there in terms of a longer discussion that we've been having. He kind of distilled it down to a song. It is the Erskin Music Show, and so let's end today with some Erskin music. I'll be back tomorrow. What I want to do tomorrow is I want to give you some highlights and some takeaways from my experience overseas. Yes, you finally do get a chance to see that. When I first came back, I was in no physical condition. I should not have been doing shows. Who knows what I would have said, and would have to apologize for it this week. I'm in somewhat better physical condition. You can still pray for me. I've got a little stomach stuff that's still going on. But for the most part, doing well and traveling. And this week, I'm going to be with Les N Downs, and we're going to be doing the event at the Alice Theater. Look for the social media. You'll see that here very soon. And then that'll be an incredible event. And then we got a newsletter that's coming out, and then we'll be traveling again next week. And then ultimately, we'll be traveling at the end of the month, going to New Hampshire And so look out for all of those dates on the Erskin Music calendar. I may be coming to a city near you very soon, and that would be just fine if I got a chance to see you as well. A couple of people who love the show. We have a fireworks director in Midland, Michigan, who watches the show regularly. Just want to say hello, Carol.
Carol Logan, the fireworks director, and you were watching the Erskin Music Show.
Great stuff. And then my daughter and her friend, who are ardent supporters of the Erskin Music Show, as they should be.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching the Erskin Music Show. Stay tuned.
All right. Stay tuned. All right, we're out the door today with All in My Head. And I will see you guys tomorrow. We'll be getting some highlights and some takeaways from overseas travel and giving you guys a little bit of a summary as to what kind of things we were able to get into. Your comments, even after the show, are appreciated and welcome as we engage in this discussion. And I know a lot of you guys have a lot of thoughtful things to say. So maybe we opened up a can of worms here. But we will we will try to squeeze toothpaste back in the bottle at some point. Ultimately, you know, what happens is we have this massive discussion that takes place about politics and all the different things that we've listed out there. Then we have an election, and then, you know, we have an inauguration, and then we have to just get down to work. Like, the flow and the pace of our society means we need to get to work. And so even the politicians know that at some point they won't be campaigning to be president. They will be president, and as president, the laws and the momentum that they need to gather is one in which moves the country forward. So we will get a chance to see that rise and fall in the political temperature of these discussions. But I thought since we were in that season, we could look at that. There's one other thing that I'm going to play probably shortly before the election. This is an interview that I did very early on in the season with Tom Buck. I think you guys will appreciate seeing some portion of that edited because all of these things are sort of evergreen when it comes to political season. So anyway, All in My Head, we're out the door. So good to see you guys tuning back in and being a part of the experience. Thank you guys for all your kind comments. And I don't know if you guys knew that I was even gone, because the excellence in broadcasting was just one show after another show after another show, but you kind of got the best of the best. And so I did give you that while I was gone. So I'm back now, and we'll work on the new best of the best shows coming up here at the Erskin Music Show. This is All in My Head. Enjoy.
They say it's all in my head, it's all in my mind. How could I love someone I've never seen? They say it's all in my head, it's all in my mind. How could I love you with every part of me? They say there's nothing special when I take a stand, 'cause they don't seem to understand what I am is who I am. Real life is more than virtual reality. Some believe and never see what they say is not stopping me. Yeah. They say it's all in my head, it's all in my mind. How could I love a God that I've never seen? They say it's all in my head, it's all in my mind. How could I love you with every part of me? I know that I am not the only one who sees the stars and feels the sun and knows just how it all was done. You know, we can't take back our yesterday, the things we do and words we say, pave the path and lead the way. They say it's all in my head, it's all in my mind. How could I love a God that I've never seen? They say it's all in my head, it's all in my mind. How could I love you with every part of me? Cause if it's all in my head, then I'm just lost in my sin. I'm lost within, I'm lost and need a friend. Cause if it's all in my head, then I'm just singing these songs, words, verbs, time to move on, yo. Cause if it's all in my head, then I'm just trapped in a maze. I'm lost in this life, I'm lost to living days. Cause if it's all in my head, it's all in my head. They say it's all in my head, it's all in my mind.